Hi, everybody. Welcome to the National Press Club, this National Press Club Newsmakers event. I'm Doug Harbrecht. I'm Digital Media Director for Kiplinger Editors here in Washington. Just a housekeeping first. When you ask your questions today, please identify yourself, who you are. We also have a number of journalists on the phone who will be submitting questions on paper here through the internet. I'm here to introduce Kate Shindle, President of the Actors Equity Association. She's here to advocate against elimination of the National Endowment for the Arts, which appears to be ready to be proposed any time now by the Trump administration. This news leaked overnight. Kate is a hardworking, dedicated actor who is currently starring in Fun Home, the Tony Award-winning Broadway production, now in its first national tour. Me, I haven't hosted a club newsmaker since Yasser Arafat 20 years ago. But as club president in 1998, it was my privilege to host Kate as the then reigning Miss America, 1998. Kate, I watched that luncheon again last night. Your courage in champion AIDS prevention and education and research at the time as a reigning Miss America was groundbreaking. And you didn't mince words. And you also showed a love of big ideas, such as Colin Powell's, your embrace of Colin Powell's America's Promise Foundation at the time, which tied scholarships with community and volunteer service. Now, 20 years later, you return to the club, a champion of continuing federal support for the arts, representing some 50,000 actors and stage managers nationwide. In a time, I might add, when the cast of Hamilton, in a curtain call, called out the Vice President of the United States for a reminder about upholding American values and to work for all Americans. Kate, good to see you still in an activist frame of mind. Kate Shindle.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. I know it's a really busy day and busy week for you all, so I appreciate you being here. I want to thank the National Press Club, of course, for hosting me today. I especially want to thank Doug for his kind introduction. I have great memories of my first time here at the National Press Club, and it was a real highlight for me. I'd also like to acknowledge the executive director of our organization, Mary McCall, who is a great partner in the fight for arts funding, as well as the producers of my current gig, Fun Home, for allowing me to be here today. I'm sure they won't be mad if I mention that Fun Home is currently playing at the Amundsen Theater in Los Angeles and will be here in DC starting April 18th. The marquee is already up. We're here today to make a strong statement in favor of full funding for the National Endowment for the Arts in the President's budget. For the past several weeks, those of us who make our living in the arts and those who have witnessed the power of the arts to transform and revitalize communities and cities across the country have been listening attentively to speculation about the potential elimination of the NEA, along with the National Endowment for the Humanities and the privatization of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. While all three are valuable entities with important goals, my primary focus here today is the value of the NEA, not only with regard to American culture, but also specific to American job creation. In short, the NEA is on the chopping block, and it shouldn't be. Actors Equity Association is a union representing more than 51,000 stage actors and stage managers across the country. At any given time, thousands of us are working on stages large and small all over America. A union for artists necessarily exists at the intersection of art and commerce, which can be a very uncomfortable place to be. But the upside of that is that we view the arts not only through a lens of cultural enrichment, but also a lens of jobs and the economy. The simple fact is that theater and the arts are an economic engine for growth and jobs, and the NEA is a key part of that formula. On this very block, you will find the Warner Theater and the National Theater. A couple blocks away is Ford's, and beyond that, the Shakespeare Theater. Across the mall is Arena Stage. Go the other way and you'll find the stages of the Kennedy Center. These houses don't just create jobs on stage and backstage, actors, stage managers, crew, musicians. And in the front of the house, box office personnel, ushers, concessions, and merchandise sales. They create administrative jobs for those who find the plays, develop the plays, fundraise, and manage the facilities. They commission writers, hire directors and choreographers, and dramaturgs and orchestrators. Beyond that, though, is the economic stimulus to the surrounding community. Are the performers and creative team local? Because if not, you have to transport them and you have to house them. The performing arts obviously attract tourists. They encourage the establishment of ancillary businesses, restaurants, parking garages, hotels, and encourage both entrepreneurship and real estate development within their geographic spheres of influence. Does anybody remember what 7th Street or 14th Street looked like 30 years ago? How about Times Square in the 80s? Have you been to Pittsburgh lately, where both management strategy and support and significant real estate development were an integral part of the drastic art-centered renaissance there? How about Cleveland, where vacancy rates have significantly declined downtown as Playhouse Square has expanded? Has anybody been to Durham since the construction of the Durham Performing Arts Center, or to Greenville since they put in the Peace Center? Across the country, the arts are a centerpiece for the revitalization of cities like Fort Worth and areas like North Hollywood and Old Las Vegas. I know this because I'm seeing it with my own eyes as I travel the country. And I'm not talking about simply building more bike lanes and espresso shops to attract creative hipsters. I'm talking about real jobs for exactly the middle class America that has been gutted by evolutions in industry and manufacturing. Does the government fund all this? Of course not. But is the NEA seed money deeply important when it comes to supporting this kind of work? You'd better believe it is. Across the country, the arts are a key driver of economic development. Millions of Americans, members of my union and many others, are employed as visual and performing artists. According to a recent report from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, arts and cultural production contributed more than $704 billion to the U.S. economy and is greater than the contributions of the construction, transportation, and warehousing industries. Critically, these are also jobs that can't be outsourced and they can't be offshored. As you probably know, the NEA also requires at least a dollar-for-dollar local match from all of its grantees. Most organizations do much better. That means that according to some estimates, the NEA's $148 million in federal funding actually generates $500 million in support for the arts nationwide. It is an enormous return on investment. So, why do Americans benefit from and support the incredible work of the NEA? This endowment makes possible the work of local and regional theaters and other arts organizations in more than 16,000 communities. The arts are not a frill or a luxury or some kind of extended vanity project. The arts are part of who we are as a nation, and the arts put our nation to work. Millions of people have jobs based on spin-off effects in hotels, restaurants, retail stores, and other businesses that benefit from spending on the arts. And live theater is a tremendous resource for local community development. Theaters bring audiences. Audiences spend money. And a lively arts scene brings people together and makes our communities safer, more prosperous, and more enjoyable. This is not a theory. This is not spin. This is fact. Additionally, the U.S. is a global leader in the arts. Movies, plays, books, and other work that originates here is extremely popular with overseas audiences, both in their home countries and when they visit us here in America. And while we run a trade deficit in many sectors, the U.S. arts industry yields a $24 billion surplus with our trading partners. Zeroing out an agency that supports a $24 billion export industry yet costs us only $148 million, will hurt everyone. So we all lose if the NEA is eliminated, but think about a program that supports the arts in all 435 congressional districts. It's the small, medium-sized, and rural communities that will bear the brunt of this cut. What happens in Iowa and Idaho and Indiana If we lose the NEA, we will lose the agency that supports youth theater in Honolulu, new plays at the Actors Theater of Louisville, theater featuring actors with disabilities in Dunwoody, Georgia, and beyond the stage, the Military Healing Arts Partnership, which supports important creative art therapy that helps our nation's wounded heroes begin on the road to recovery. The NEA funded Shakespeare in America's Communities program. Like so many of its grants, benefits schools and children. This grant assists 40 theater companies in 25 states and here in the District of Columbia to hold performances, artistic and technical workshops, symposia about the productions, and educational programs in schools from coast to coast. Many of the local and regional theaters where I have personally performed during my career would struggle to exist without the key strategic investments from the NEA. These local and regional theaters are where new voices are heard, new pieces are developed, and the seeds are planted for the next generation of art that supports American jobs at home and American exports abroad. So, for members of Congress, here's the takeaway. The NEA supports the arts in your district. Eliminating the NEA means fewer jobs in your district. Americans understand that the arts are vital to our country, and we'd actually like to see more public support, not less. A December 2015 Ipsos Public Affairs poll conducted on behalf of Americans for the Arts indicates that by a huge majority, 55% to 19%, Americans say we should more than double public funding for the arts. Americans support funding for live theater and arts programming because we see the impact it has in our lives and our communities. President Trump has promised to be a voice for all Americans in Washington. The President and the Congress should listen to what the American people are saying. Live theater and other performing and visual arts are an important part of vibrant, growing, and economically healthy communities. Mr. President, you were the brains behind the art of the deal. When deals crossed your desk that guaranteed matching funds for every dollar you invested, you signed them. And in that book, you wrote extensively about leverage. Estimates reveal that each dollar in NEA seed money can be leveraged to result in a total of $9 in public and private money to support the arts in America. The NEA is an exceptional example of a relatively small portion of the federal budget paying huge dividends for arts institutions and jobs. You also wrote that, quote, "I like thinking big, I always have. To me, it's very simple. If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big." I ask that you think big about the value, both in terms of culture and in terms of dollars and jobs, that the arts provide across this great country. The NEA is part of who we are and what connects us as a nation. Let's keep the momentum we have by expanding, not cutting, support for American artists. That's all I have to say off the top here. Thank you all for being here. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any. Yes?
Jonathan Solank with the Star Ledger. Are we going to see actors now on Capitol Hill lobbying, testifying? I mean, you can command a lot of press attention for trying to fight back the NEA elimination.
Well, here's what I will say. First of all, yes, Americans for the Arts runs Arts Advocacy Day, which I believe is happening next week, and we are sending a team. But this morning, no, actually it was last night. Sorry, I'm sort of jet laggy at the moment, but I posted the Times piece about the elimination of the NEA and said, not if we have anything to say about it. And the first response was, what do we do, Madam President? You've got an army behind you. So if that's any indication of how my members feel, I think that we will see artists all over the place. And not just, I think we confuse working artists sometimes with celebrities. Most of the people I know and represent aren't famous, and they're not going to be able to, draw a bunch of cameras. But these are working Americans, and we aspire, many of us, to not to fame and fortune, but to a solid middle-class living. So, yeah, I think we'll be here, absolutely.
Kate, I have a
Yeah.
question here
Sure.
from Sharon Haddock. She represents the Deseret News in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is a regional question. Will the proposed cuts affect Utah arts? How much? And what can the average citizen patron of the arts do about the changes?
Yes, the proposed cuts will affect every state. Like I said a few minutes ago, there are 16,000, more than 16,000 communities where the NEA makes grants. So absolutely, absolutely, these cuts will affect Utah. I think the average citizen can do a couple of things. First of all, contact the local arts organization in your community and ask how they would like you to support them, because they may have their own initiatives planned for communicating their opposition to these cuts. And I think that having a really organic grassroots uprising from people who value the arts center in their own communities is probably going to be more effective than just having people fly in from New York and LA and say, we need the arts. There's a role for all of it, but I think that people who value the arts in their community should contact those institutions and say, what do you want me to do? And much of that may have to do with things like signing petitions. There are several circulating out there, contacting your legislators and making it clear, especially in some cases in red states, that the arts are not something that are frivolous. The arts are a job creator and an economic engine and a valuable part of our community. So I think that those are sort of a few starter things, and pay attention to this issue, I believe, because ironic for me, I guess, in this room to say, because there's a lot going on at the moment, but I think that there are real possibilities for important things to get lost in the shuffle, and we don't want this to be one of them. Yep. Yes.
Hi, Adam Ayton with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Hi, Adam.
So we, over in St. Louis, are kind of concerned with poverty programs and kind of doing away with some of the segregation that's kind of happened in the inner cities.
Mm-hmm.
Do these art programs speak to that at all, or bringing up youth? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, look, the NEA has a wide swath of initiatives, and it runs the gamut from arts education programs for early childhood education to proactively promoting diversity within cities, but also across the country. I think that the NEA has been a real leader in identifying theaters that aren't just doing shows, for example, but that are trying to make a positive impact on their community. We were just in St. Louis, and I feel like I know quite a bit about what you're talking about, although clearly I don't live there. But, every city and every community has its own unique landscape, right? And one of the reasons that I think the NEA works is because they distribute the money sometimes statewide and sometimes citywide and sometimes directly to institutions, but so that they can figure out how to apply for it, how to best use it in their own communities, and how to really maximize those dollars. It's not just a program giving money from on high for things that the national organization thinks should be done. It's a real initiative that's driven by what's needed in particular communities.
Sir.
Yeah.
Hi, Glenn Marcus, First Amendment Media Group.
Hi.
You've leading me into the weeds for just a split second. So the issue of both endowments have state-based programs where they give money to the individual states,
Mm-hmm.
And that leads into the concern that some people have about people on high
Right.
issue. Approximately what percentage of the arts endowment's money is distributed to the state programs, and how would the elimination of the others and of the more national initiatives
Mm-hmm.
and funding affect the overall operation? Because there are some who say that it should simply be distributing money to the states and letting them make the decisions.
Yeah, I understand the state's argument. I don't know the percentages off the top of my head. I'd be happy to find them for you. But I think that the emphasis here should be on the fact that local and state organizations are able to take this money and leverage it into much more money that they can do with as they see fit and as they determine will best help their own communities. But yeah, I'm happy to get you those numbers.
I'm Carol Morgan. I'm a sculptor and a painter and an actress. And I was wondering if you had any figures on the value of movies that might be exported abroad. I wanted to compare that with other exports that this country has.
Yeah, there are those numbers available. Again, I don't know them off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to follow up with you.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Hi,
Hi.
Alan Robinson with NBC. You
Hi.
were talking about kind of creating the landscape here on 14th, here on 7th Street,
Yeah.
up in New York. But who are the communities that you see really impacted by eliminating the NEA altogether?
Well, I think that the commonly held philosophy is that the arts in New York, for example, may survive in a different way than the arts in small rural communities across the country where the NEA money is the only game in town. So what we have looked at fairly carefully is the fact that those rural communities or those small towns will be hit the hardest because the NEA money doesn't just finance theater, it also creates legitimacy. So if a smaller theater is trying to go to a private foundation, they can use the imprimatur of getting money from the NEA to raise their other financing. In New York, there is I don't want to say that money is not needed. The money is very much needed in New York City, but it's not the only game in town. And so I think that the smaller, more rural communities will be the ones that are hit the hardest. Anybody else?
Questions? Any other questions?
Great. Yes.
I'm Marina Fang from the Huffington Post.
Hi.
I've been just kind of following up on all of the response to this morning. Already, some of the Trump administration officials are coming out and trying to defend all of these
Yeah.
proposed cuts. And one of the things that Mick Mulvaney just mentioned, he was referring to PBS specifically, but
Yeah.
I wonder what your response was. I think he said something to the effect of he doesn't think coal miners and single moms should pay for PBS and arts organizations, but they should be paying for defense.
Right.
What's your
I saw that too. He was on Morning Joe, I think, right? So I saw that too, and I thought, but don't coal miners' kids watch Sesame Street too? Don't they learn their alphabet and any number of things from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's programs? I can understand why, if you use the reductive argument that the arts are something extra, that you could think that you were cutting waste. But the important argument here to me is that this is not waste. This is actually very well spent money that these organizations distribute. And yeah, that kind of blew my mind. But it's not, I guess it's not an uncommon misunderstanding. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, National Press Club. And we're happy to have any follow-up conversations you need. Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming. Just a note, tomorrow we'll have a newsmaker here on a panel of budget experts who will be speaking here in the MPC's Lissagore room. Stan Collender, Executive Vice President of Corvus, Jim Dyer, Principal of the Podesta Group, Bob Greenstein, President and founder of the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and G. William Hoagland, Senior Vice President of the Bipartisan Policy Center. So make a note of that. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming.